Good evening. Welcome to our panel event this evening. My name is Ellen Burgin and I am the Membership and Communications Manager for Mercury Musical Developments and Musical Theatre Network. And we're so excited to be here tonight with a brilliant panel. Before I let James Hadley, our Executive Director of Musical Theatre Network, introduce everyone and introduce the event, just a quick couple of bits of housekeeping. We are broadcasting live to YouTube now, and you can place your comments in the live chat box. We ask, if you can, to preface it with question in capital letters, just so we don't miss anything. And if you're watching on replay, hello. Over to James.
Thank you, Ellen, and welcome everyone. I'm James from Musical Theatre Network, and as many of you may know if you're watching this live, we're only just under 3 months away from Beam, and we're doing some digital filming of pictures as part of the preparation for that over the next few weeks. So we thought, what better time than to have a wider conversation about what's best practice in putting together a digital pitch of a new musical in development. What do people want to see when they're receiving information about show in development online, and what are we doing in the digital age in terms of putting musical theatre content out there on the web and on social media platforms and so on? So today we're going to have a discussion about people's approaches to putting the content together and thinking about what best information is most relevant, how best to present the content, what formats to use for putting that content together. And then in about a month's time, we're going to do part 2 on Thursday, the 22nd of July. So do join us for that as well. And that will be looking at how do you best market and distribute that content, what social media platforms, what online platforms you might use, how best to approach potential development and staging partners, how best to approach a direct email of content. But today it's part 1, looking at how we put the content together, what people find is most useful to receive in their inbox or on the social media platforms that they're engaging with when they're looking at horizon scanning and seeing what's coming through. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. We're very lucky to have 4 fabulous people from the industry joining us today. First of all, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Newman from Pitlochry to introduce herself, please.
Hi everybody, my name is Elizabeth, as James said. Lovely to be with you all this evening. I'm the Artistic Director of Pitlochry Festival Theatre, which is a mid-scale regional theatre in the Highlands of Scotland. We now produce, when we're not in COVID time, between 9 and 10 homegrown productions every year, and typically at least 2 of those are musicals. Going forward, we are going to have further performance spaces. So this summer, we've actually built and opened an amphitheatre. But as of next year, we'll be opening a studio theatre, which will also be a hub for new musical development as well. So one of the endeavours that we launched at the end of last year was a collaboration with Capital Theatres, which is a commercial organisation in Edinburgh, which is the festival theatre, as well as the King's Theatre, to find new musicals, which we've been developing in something called the Commissioning Musical Hub. And we've got 3 musicals in development at the moment. So we're really passionate about producing existing work. So next year we're going to be doing a big musical with Capital Theatres, as well as we've got a new musical in development, a big large scale musical. But we're also really excited about new stories as well. So, it's a balance between existing and new. That's it.
Amazing. Thanks, Elizabeth. And over to Tim.
Hello. Thank you very much to MMD and MTN for inviting me onto this panel. My name's Tim Sutton. I'm a composer and lyricist, and sometimes MD as well. I do a lot of work teaching musical theatre at the places like Oxford School of Drama, Lambda, RAM, and particularly at Book Music and Lyrics, where I've taught since 2011. I'm also a judge for, or often a judge for the Styles and Drew Best Song Award and the Mentorship Scheme, as well as judging other musical theatre competitions. So I see a lot of musicals, and I'm working on my own. I'm working on 3 new shows, one with Roy Williams about the Bristol bus boycott, which is being commissioned by China Plate, One which is, I can't tell you the name of, but working with Richie Hughes. Hopefully we'll be able to tell you about that shortly. And another one working with the original creators of the movie Restless Natives to turn that into a stage adaptation. That's me. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this evening.
Amazing. Thank you, Tim. And over to Kiki.
Hi, my name is Kiki Stevenson. I have been the artistic program coordinator at the Other Palace for the past 3-4 years. I am still with LW Theatres, even though the Other Palace has been put up for sale. Who knows what will come of that? But as I'm sure everyone knows, the Other Palace has been focused on musical theatre. And so in my capacity, I've been looking over a lot of the development work of new musicals down in our studio space, sat in on, in-person panels for beam pitches, as well as managing our own submissions, both open submissions of musicals, as well as for our new musical theatre podcast, All That Scratch. So very familiar with receiving many a submission.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kiki. And last but by no means least, over to Bartek.
Thanks, James. Hi, my name is Bartek. I make videos of all sorts. Some of them are live, some aren't. Some of them are theater related, some aren't. Especially over the last year, I guess year and a half now, however long this has been going on for. I have done a lot of live streams. Some of those were actual shows put on in actual theaters. Some of those were readings done completely remotely. Other than that, I make music videos, I write and direct. Actually, shameless plug, we released a music video for Daisy Truth's Music Is There today, so check it out.
Thank you very much, everyone. And so to kick it all off, I'd like to start with, what makes you interested in getting involved with a particular musical in development when someone pitches one? Now, this can be pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, digital pitch, in-person pitch. What makes you go, I want to get involved with that? Anyone may begin.
I can start. I think the most important thing for me would always be content. When we're looking for things to either put on at the Other Palace or to support with development, we were always looking for interesting, unique, modern stories. Interpret that as you will, because everyone's going to. I think when I say modern, I do mean if you are adapting a book or a novel, asking yourself why, and being clear as to why, if it's an older book or novel or film, why that's necessary, and making that really clear. Looking for well-rounded, multi-layered, non-stereotypical characters, and then music that feels honest to whatever story that is, making sure that feels in sync. And then also personality. I want to make sure that the people who are pitching this musical would be somebody I want to work with. Are they going to be able to listen to feedback and be open to feedback? I think that's a really important thing. If there isn't a connection personality-wise, I'd be less interested. And of course, that if it's digitally, that's a bit harder to come across, but food for thought on how you convey personality in an online pitch or digital pitch. And then obviously the Other Palace was a commercial space. So whether or not there was any commercial potential for the show, is the pitch something that's going to fit? Have they thought through cast and band sizes? Is this something that our audiences would be interested in? Yeah, probably a good place to start.
Primarily as a musician, I suppose I'm always, my ear is always tweaked by music which shows originality, whether that's harmonically, rhythmically, or in any of the parameters. I think it's, even if you're, if you compose on the guitar, even if you feel your harmonic vocabulary is limited, I'm always interested by people who are kind of reaching a little bit further, and something where where it's a language that I haven't heard before. And I think that also extends to mode of presentation of a musical. You know, we would like to see musicals which have a particular point of view, a particular point of originality, not just in terms of the content, but also in terms of a theatrical sense, I suppose. And of course, the opportunities for doing that in the digital age are enhanced. And I think that what you don't want to be doing is doing the same as the last hit. You know, doing a, you know, obviously when Hamilton came along, there were a slew of rap musicals, and it's the same thing with any big successful show. But that's not necessarily the way to go. Is to find another one of those, because you won't have done it as well as the but you'll do your own thing better, you know. So that's the way to go.
I think it's all about the story. For us, it comes back to, following on from what Tim said. Obviously, you want to know the music's going to be good, otherwise you haven't got one, you know. But definitely for us, it's always about, is the story going to ignite something in the audience, and that always comes in various forms. So then the story needs to be great enough for somebody to sing. And quite often, when I've had musicals in development or been part of the development of musicals, sometimes not enough time is actually spent on really getting the story to be amazing. So then you have this situation whereby, because so much feeling is required to generate music dramatically, that if there isn't that drama there to mean that people are singing, it just doesn't work, does it? You know, it never quite hangs together. So for us, I guess it's the story. Is the story relevant to the audience? And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's set in the now, but that there's something within it that relates to what's going on in the world for them. And also, is it something that is going to profoundly affect the audience as well? So, you know, when I think about the finest musicals that I've had the privilege to direct, they've had a real impact on the audience, and that impact can be, you know, the Howard Goodall effect of, you know, something like The Hired Man or Love Story, which leaves you just understanding your own humanity. But on the other extreme, you know, there's also the joyful musicals like Singing in the Rain and Summer Holiday, which are just a celebration of being alive, and that also has its place. So I think there's, yeah, that sense of, is it going to really be amazing for the audience, is always what we come back to in the end.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth, and everyone. Before we talk in more detail about the sort of technical side of how might we approach digital pitches in terms of the medium, I want to, for the next question, ask about the sort of content. Is sort of building on your answers so far. What content is useful for people to receive, or as an artist to put into your pitch, if you've been making pitches of your own work? So thinking about digital pitching in particular, what's where, you know, you're having to put things into a digital medium, what's the information that is going to be most relevant to put into, to say, a 10-minute film, or into an email, or into a recording? I'm going to start with Bartek before we come back to Bartek a little bit later to talk about the sort of technical approaches to putting this content together. More from your experience of collaborating with artists, Bartek, what have you noticed seems to be the most common sort of information that people are putting in there, or what do you see people, what goes across well in terms of the actual content?
So I'm actually going to go in a completely different direction than what's the most common, because I think that it's very useful to think not about how everyone else does their pitch, but rather what your particular show is about and what your approach to your show is first, and then figuring out how you can communicate it. And that can mean a lot of different things when your pitch is digital. Because if if what you're presenting is in the form of a video, then anything that's visual or anything that's auditory can go in there, which literally means that without yet having any kind of production design done, you can actually just go with your phone, film clips of something that's visually relevant, and include that in your video pitch on top of what you're talking as a representation of what's actually in your mind, without having to spend money on building the set or on putting together the costumes. And I think that's often the way to go, because by the time you're pitching, you already have a lot of the visual side of the show in your mind. It doesn't have to be extremely detailed yet, but you have an idea of where it's going. And I think going out there and just walking around with your phone and finding things that are in that same visual space can both be helpful for the pitch in terms of communicating that, but can also help you develop some new ideas. So I wouldn't. So there are elements that will be common for everything, but especially in terms of those purely creative ideas, communicating what your show is, I would actually try and just come up with things that can be very rough, but just really connect with what's in your head.
Thanks, Bartek. Maybe over to Elizabeth next. I wonder, can you talk about, in terms of your musical commissioning hub, the content that you received there? Presumably you saw lots of digital pictures in that context. What sort of content, from having looked at all of those pictures, was most common or most effective, did you find in that context?
This relates back to Tim's point, really. So it's a combination of me and Tim in this moment. Tim, we've never met before in person, but I'm making out like we're friends. Well. So the pictures that were most successful, so we had a lot, and we had a brilliant panel of amazing composers and artists who supported the selection. So for Fiona and I, Fiona is the CEO of Capitol Theatres. Both of us were really keen to make sure that artists were around the table to make that selection, versus it continuing to just be one person within an organisation. And the panel was a mixture of composers and actors and writers and producers. And within the producers, artistic directors, as well as commercial producers. And what the panel went for was brilliant music, because otherwise it's not going to work, and really cracking stories. And often it was tracks that were sent, and everybody went, oh, there's something really in that. And quite often it was just one page of narrative. Interestingly, the scripts that were sent in, or the really, often it wasn't the most developed projects that actually the panel were inspired by. A couple of the people were a bit like, but we've got the full thing, and it's there, and it's but interestingly, it didn't have the fizz. The script actually highlighted, the full script actually highlighted that it wasn't there. Interestingly, sometimes more information is not a good thing, and that the music wasn't rich enough, and or the actual story wasn't powerful enough. So I think that's the key thing, is it's not necessarily about volume. And actually, if you're landing in somebody's inbox, which is the thing, pithy, which I really struggle with as a person, hence still rambling, is the key. It's like if somebody clicks on, I'm about to list out, our favorite tracks of all musicals. If you click on the opening number of West Side Story, that's going to be brilliant. If that's the only thing you listen to, you'd probably commission the entire musical off of it. And interestingly, in all of my years commissioning work, it has been on a one thing. It's not been on a, so So also don't feel like you have to do all the work that you should actually be being commissioned for. Yeah.
That's such a good point. That's what initially when we started watching pictures for Beam around the UK, and we were debating, is 10 minutes really long enough for people to really get across? But you realize to create a really focused 10-minute pitch, you get down to the essence of what that vision is. And if you can do that, that's great. I mean, Tim, as an artist, sorry, Ellen, I'm doing like the same question, but 4 variants of it, I'm hoping. So Tim's response, can you give us from your perspective as a musical theatre writer, have you ever done digital only pitches or just talking about pitching your ideas to people generally? What have you found are the things to emphasize about your work? What's been your approach to developing a pitch?
I haven't pitched digitally, but I have edited and shot my own videos for trailers for shows, cabaret shows, and so on. And I've pitched in the room to Beam and so on. I think, and also hopefully answering a question which has come up about writing synopses as well. It's very much building on Elizabeth's point that concision and clarity are key, and I think that what I would seek to do as an artist would be to convey the essence of the idea in the fewest possible words with the maximum impact. I wouldn't seek, for example, to go into huge amounts of depth in terms of narrative, in terms of plot, because I think that's sort of requiring a producer to sort of follow lines of a drama. I mean, they may ask questions about where does this go, but I think very often people find when they're explaining their stories that actually they haven't thought enough about their stories. So I think unless you've got your elevator pitch completely down so that you can give an essence of the show in a few sentences, or 2 sentences or 1 sentence, then you probably need to be working harder at your dramaturgy. So I think the idea, the initial idea, and what it means to you, and to spend the time treating yourself like a professional, treating oneself like a professional. This is an idea I believe in. Here it is at its most distilled. And obviously, if you have any further questions, please ask. I'd always go that way around rather than, as Elizabeth said, rather try to cram everything in, and which can often leave people a little bit sort of overloaded, overstimulated in a short pitch when people, especially if it's in a scenario whereby a producer is listening to a whole afternoon of pitches, can very easily, the eyes can glaze over. That's my feeling.
Absolutely. And before we hand over to Ellen for the next question, over to Kiki, I mean, maybe talking about your wealth of experience at the other palace in terms of people pitching digitally and in person to you. What stays in the mind in terms of the top tips of what they need to include?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the concise synopsis is hands down completely right. To Tim's point, I've had listening days where we've listened to 50 plus musical pitches in one go, and you're right, they can run together, especially if you get lost in details that don't seem to hit the spark of what the musical essence is about. So I don't know if this is helpful, but maybe if you're struggling in writing that synopsis, go to your bookshelf, read the back of a book, see how they've summed up that book, go read a theater review. A lot of theater reviewers sum up that show really concisely in a few paragraphs. If you can boil down that essence, once you have that producer, that venue, that whomever you're pitching to's attention, then they'll ask for more. I think really good advice if you're submitting an unsolicited pitch, please don't send a script and a full workshop recording off the bat, because if I don't know you, I wouldn't necessarily have 2 hours to investigate that. So let me come back to you and say, tell me more if I'm interested. We always ask for 2 contrasting songs rather than something visual, but obviously if you have visual, send it. With the songs, obviously do whatever you can within your budget. By no means go outside of your budget, but the best recordings that you can do, I highly recommend. I know a lot of writers perform their own work, and it's absolutely brilliant if you think you're the right person to perform that song. If you aren't, I'm sure everyone's got some mates who can sing something in tune and you know, put that across. I think all of us who receive pitches can embrace the suspension of disbelief and accept a piece of new writing for new writing and get to the root of it. But you know, it always is a bit of a barrier if you're trying to listen to something that's maybe not recorded to its best of its ability. And I also really find it's interesting as a venue to know what development the show has been through. Is this your first draft? Have you done an R&D somewhere? Are you know, what stage is that? Who else do you have attached to the piece? If you're in a stage where you know you have a director already, or this, that's always really good to know. This industry is all about, you know, who's who and who do you know. So obviously, if I recognize the name on someone you're working with, that will make me more open or interested in saying, ah, yes, I know so and so. Great, that's very interesting. And then obviously it depends on what stage what your piece is in. And I think in a pitch, to Elizabeth's point, an idea is just as exciting as a fully completed show. And again, whatever the pitch is for, just be specific and be aware of what you're pitching for. Obviously, if we're, I don't know, if it was for all that scratch, I wouldn't want something that's, I don't know, too early and you don't even have any music, because obviously it's a podcast, we're going to be listening to music. So just know whom you're pitching for, just like you would writing a CV for a new job. You're tailoring your CV to that job. Have done your research, know who you're pitching for, be clear about what you're pitching for, because that would be a barrier as well for the person receiving the pitch. If it feels like, you know, you sent me an email at the other palace and then you copied and pasted it and sent it to the seller.
That's such fantastic advice. Thank you, Kiki. And just picking up on what you were saying, I mean, I was just about to ask a technical question, but to the entire panel, who do you think creatives should be thinking of as their audience when developing these digital pitches? So what's the difference between maybe pitching online or pitching to producers, pitching to venues, pitching to other collaborators even? How do you, you know, tailor each pitch, or what are your tips for kind of reaching the right people? Who would like to begin?
Well, I'm sure that knowing your audience, just to, you know, again, as Kiki just said, I'm sure that's really important, that you're not, you know, pitching Texas Chainsaw Massacre the musical to you know, a family producer. Or at least that's not your first choice. I just think there's a sort of a big common sense thing that, you know, you go to the producer who you fit, or a, you know, a 20-hander or a 30-hander musical to a small producer who is known to do you know, small scale touring or whatever, because unless they have a sudden change of fortune or not, you know, a lot of producers really enjoy and have a specialism in one particular, and that might be small scale touring, and they might do that very well. So just, I think they will be flattered that you have done the research and that you feel that your musical is right for them. And conversely, they will be slightly bored by feeling that you've given them a pitch which is entirely inappropriate. I don't know. Is that fair, or do you like things to come out of left field, sort of asking the producers in the house here? I don't know, because I'm not a producer. But
would anyone like to add to that?
I think what is always really refreshing, to sort of respond to you and Tim, Ellen, is when people have actually thought about the audience. So you would be really surprised, and I'm sure no one that's watching this or anyone on the screen would do this, but how many people have not actually considered the audience and what they would like or love or be inspired by. Quite often it's about the artist's own personal desire to make something which is brilliant. And as an artist myself, I totally and utterly have those urges and those feelings. However, my role is to serve an audience, and I serve Scotland. So the majority of 80% of the audience that comes to the theatre that I run is from across Scotland, and the other 20% is actually from all over the world. So it's really great when someone writes and goes, we've come up with this story because we have been to Pitlochry and we've sat in the audience and we've seen that the audience love this, or we've looked at all the things that you've done in the past and we can see that you're really interested in, and there's been that dialogue with the organisation, versus quite often what happens, which is people write about, I'm really passionate about doing this project and I need to get it on, and you're on a list that I've made, so I'm just going to write to you, and I don't really know where Pitlochry even is really, but you do musicals because I've googled it, and and you can sort of tell that, and I'm sounding glib, but actually that is what happens. And what that leads to is also feeling like you don't know how that relationship's going to pan out either, because you don't know if the artists themselves are actually going to enjoy working with the organisation, because that's also part of it as well. So I think it sort of links to that too. But Ellen, I just noticed there's a question from Martin about writing Synopsis, and I just wanted to answer it. Is that
Yeah,
all
of
right?
course. Please add in there.
Just because I read a lot of them, and this isn't me. This isn't my wisdom at all. This has been from years ago when I trained as a script editor, which is when you're writing a synopsis, the key thing is, as Tim said, it's not about plot. So it's not and then, because that's not drama. Not trying to teach grandmothers to suck eggs, but a really nifty way of getting around it in your own mind is between each sentence there has to be a but or a therefore. So you definitely guarantee that it's a drama and a story versus a series of interesting incidences that hang together through tripping over each other. And I learned this technique years ago, and it's really kept me right, because even when I go to write a story down or support a writer, I can see where the drama doesn't relate. And it's something you can practice. So I do it as a game with myself. So I watch a film, like recently I watched the Chicago 7, which I love, the Aaron Sorkin. If you haven't seen it, watch it, it's amazing. And because Aaron Sorkin's so brilliant, you can do it really quickly. So you can go, but therefore, and it all relates. So that's just a tip really about how to make sure that your synopsis is actually drama and not pleasant plot, as I would call it. Thanks.
It's funny because I'm literally dealing with this now while writing something, and whenever I forget about it, it's like, why is this starting to get so boring? I'm at an outline level, so it's still like one paragraph per scene. And like, okay, stuff happens, but so what? And then, oh, right, I forgot about that. And then the moment I change that, it starts working.
Well, there we go. There's evidence of this method working right there. So, I mean, I'll ask now Bartek, but also the entire panel. So we'd love to talk through some of the options on how to best film and record your content from your musical digitally. And that could be professional looking content, or like on your phone. How can you best capture content from your musical with a small budget?
So, first of all, don't worry about how it looks, or at least that should not be your first concern. And not just because it's a musical, but in general, even if we weren't talking about musicals at all, Uh, your first focus should be how do I make it sound good, and not just the performance part, but also just when you're delivering your pitch, that already should sound good. And there's actually kind of a rule in film that's very often ignored by film students and first-time filmmakers, which is worry about making things sound good. And if you can't make them sound good on set, do a voiceover. So literally, the very first feature film that Chris Nolan did has a lot of voiceover because that was his solution to not being able to make it sound good on set. So in the context of pitching, if you're recording yourself talking, that might mean using tricks like, let's say you only have your phone to film yourself on. Ideally, don't rely on the sound from that phone. Have a second phone that's a lot closer to you. You generally want the microphone to be very close to the sound source. There is a limit to that. Like, unless you're using a mic like this, you don't necessarily want it to be right in your face. But you want to be able to reach out and touch your microphone. If it's further than that, it's probably too far. So yeah, use two phones. Use one for sound, one for video, and then combine video from one, audio from the other in an editing program. It will sound much better. If you can spend even a few pounds on like a clip-on mic that plugs into a phone, that will help as well. Generally, mics that sound okay are not expensive. Mics that sound great are expensive, but you don't need an amazing mic for a pitch. You need a mic that works for a pitch, and that solves a lot of your problems. It's obviously a bit more difficult if you are filming a musical theater performance. That will depend very much on the space that you're in. If you're using some kind of a rehearsal space, a studio, a theater, they will very often have some equipment there already. So that might take care of it. But if you're picking a space with recording in mind, check what they have available. Because it's possible that a space that looks a little bit worse will be much better equipped in terms of sound, and that is worth a lot more for a pitch. Because again, first of all, you want to make sure that it sounds good. Also, both for any speaking parts and for the performance parts, do plan to spend some time in post-production, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you have the budget for a sound mixer. Don't just assume that what gets recorded is what goes out. Tweak it, even if it's literally just a single audio track of one person talking about their show. Even within 15 minutes, you can make that sound better just by doing things like denoising, compression, a little bit of equalization. And it might not seem like the most important thing, but even subconsciously, people react better to things that sound better. It's that thing where if you find someone's voice annoying, you will be less receptive to what they're saying. And it's kind of the equivalent of that, but in tech. If the way they record sound is very tinny, you will, even on a subconscious level, react to that. So spend even 15 minutes tweaking your sound, and it will really, really improve the pitch. And the second thing is, this is both for the performance parts and the straight up pitching, although in different ways, it's lighting. 95% of the people watching this have a decent camera in their pocket right now. It's not the best camera, it has a lot of limitations, but it is absolutely competent of recording something that will look good, as long as you give it something to record that looks good. And most of the time, the reason why phone videos look bad is that they're badly lit. There's not enough lighting, or it's really awkward. So, for example, right now I'm using actual film lights, which obviously helps. But one of the things that I'm doing with the main light here is I'm bouncing it off a very cheap, maybe £10 5-in-1 reflector that you can get easily on Amazon. And you can do the same with any strong light. And what that will do is it softens that light, so it looks a bit better on my skin. If I just pointed that really harsh source directly at me, there would be a lot of harsh shadows, it would look worse. So you can do that with any light. Bounce it off something. It can even be bouncing it off a wall. And actually, for the digital pitches that we're doing in a few weeks, even though I have these lights, I've planned to bounce one of them off a wall, just so I don't have to bring a third light. And I'm kind of using the space to help myself a little bit. And people have done, like, there's honestly, if you want to make the speaking part look good, look for YouTube tutorials on budget filmmaking, because there are a lot of tricks there. There's stuff like shining a light through a shower curtain in order to soften it. There are a lot of tricks like that, and they very often they cost very little to implement, and you're still using your phone camera. If you can use an actual camera, that helps, but that would literally be the last thing to think about if you're doing it yourself, if you're on a budget and you don't have a camera available.
Brilliant, thanks Bartek. Over to Kiki with the question now, sort of building on that. As a programmer at the venue end of things and a producer, what do you want ideally to, if someone's making an approach, it's not in a context of wider opportunities to pitch, what would you want to arrive in your inbox in terms of an email that's going to have a pitch in it? Perhaps it's unsolicited, but they know that, you know, say it was when you were at the other palace and there was an open call out for new musicals in development. Thinking about the sort of format, like if they're sending songs, how many songs, if there's text in the email, as we said, don't send a full script, but how much text ideally would you want them to send, or would you want a single sample scene, or would you want a link to a video if there's footage, as Bartek was talking about, what length of footage would you watch? Sometimes I know people do send a video of their full 3-hour production, and presumably you don't have much time for watching 3-hour long videos. So in terms of the actual length and quantity, or what type of content, what would you say you would want to see in an email?
That's a really good question. I would say from a venue perspective, especially if it's an unsolicited email or something it's not part of a specific call out, I would recommend thinking in the terms of how long is this person going to spend reading my email? And I would say if it's a cold email like that, 2 to 3 minutes maximum. So what can you get across in 2 and 3 minutes? And I think it's really up to whomever is pitching or submitting to decide what parts of their piece are going to be most representative of what they want to get across. So if you think that's a 90-second music video, fantastic. If you think that's 2 contrasting songs, so I have a choice to listen, if I like one, then I can listen to the other one, great. But I think, I know we keep coming back to it, but something succinct that's going to catch my attention, it's going to whet my appetite, and I'm going to say, oh, that sounds really, really interesting. I want to know more. So it's a musical. Obviously, I need to know content. I need to know some sense of character. I need to know what the music soundscape sounds like. And then I can sort of probably put the pieces together and figure out if the tone, if the content is something that is going to be right for the venue, or if it's something that we're interested in. So I don't want to limit anyone. I think whatever you think best represents the piece that you're working on. And to the points that have already been made, more creative, the better. Like if you sent me something I've never seen before in a different context, that's exciting as long as I can access it. that's really exciting. I'm not saying now go and find the strangest way to make a pitch, because the typical way is absolutely fine as well. But yes, be succinct, be clear, have that elevator pitch nailed down as clearly as possible. But also don't forget, we're all in theater because we love it. We don't do it for the money. We don't do it for the fame. We do it because we love it. So we want to find people that are passionate and personable, but also be professional. So don't use your 5th grade AOL email account to email me in like font 10 green. I want to know that I'm working with somebody who, or potentially working with somebody who is going to come at it on a professional level. But show me your passion. Show me why you're making theater and not writing a novel or composing something for BBC. And maybe you're also doing that. But like, why is the story that you want to tell right for theater? And show me, or tell me. 2 to 3 minutes.
Thanks, Kiki. Tim and Elizabeth, if you have any further thoughts on this.
I was thinking of videos I've seen of new musicals which have sort of no-nos, or no, it's not no-nos, but just things which turn me off or make me feel as though the writers maybe haven't gone through the process of saying, is my show ready, and kind of put it out too soon, or it is ready, but the actual video is not a sufficient representation of the show. And I think there are very basic things, like as if you were sending a CV to somebody, make sure it's spell checked. I've seen video content with typos, and that's just an immediate. Is not to say that everyone has to have degree level English, but you should check it out. You should get a friend just to go through it and make sure, because if there are typos in there, a literary manager is just going to feel not judging you, but just judging the process that you've been through, that you haven't actually said, is this content ready to be viewed by a professional eyes and ears. Stuff that I wouldn't do. Again, this is some of it comes down to taste, so you feel free to disregard any of it. Your mileage may vary, but I don't like sort of karaoke lyrics, sing along lyrics on the bottom of because you don't need to be teaching the producer how the song goes. And if you're worried about the clarity of the song, A, it's probably not the most important thing, and B, maybe that means you should get it re-recorded, or as Bartek said, make sure that the sound quality is as good as it can be. Don't try to explain the whole thing, and just things like is your show ready to go? Is a really important question, I think, and that again it speaks to whether you've been brave enough to open it out to your friends and family criticism, and perhaps going a little bit further afield, taking it to labs or taking it to forums whereby you're going to get constructive feedback from informed colleagues. I think that it's really important that because I think that shows that kind of go off half cock, as it were, that aren't quite ready just you'll suffer if you kind of try and let it out before it's ready, because the kind of the non-response, which is probably what will happen, or the polite rejection, is likely to do more damage than taking those extra that extra time, whatever that time is, to make sure that it's in a position where albeit that we do love a great idea, but if you've for example, just is it the right title? I've seen two examples. I've seen, not naming names, but I've seen a show where I wasn't sure how to pronounce the title, and that's just a kind of weird thing, because that unless you change the title, any producing house which is trying to sell that show is going to have to be on the phone to punters saying, well, it's just more a reason for people to discount you. And the other one is, I saw recently a show which seemed to have about 3 possible titles on its poster, and I wasn't actually sure what the show was called. Was that the title and that the subtitle, or vice versa? And then there was an extra line of dialogue here. I literally didn't know what the show was called. So these sort of very sort of 101 sort of things about, does your show have a character that you can sell? You know, because you know when you have to have a title that's impactful, people know how to pronounce it. It starts to sort of accrue good content. Good clear images start to suggest themselves, and you can start to kind of put a pitch around that. So I've got lots of no-nos, but that's probably a little bit of a negative way of going. But you know what I mean? I think there's a kind of qualitative issue whereby it's sort of, because we see so many shows and so many pitches that actually you just go, oh, I'm going to discount that. Sorry, life's too short, which seems a bit harsh. But then again, I'm not in the position of actually being a producer, so I'm not the one who has to make those calls. But I do judge a lot of competitions, and those sorts of things do influence one's perception, largely because if it's a bad pitch or a bad synopsis, it's often congruent with the actual quality of the content. So those are my sort of those are my sort of no-nos or probably don'ts. Sorry, I've gone on a bit.
Should I be really short and just try and I think the key thing here, and again, it's not me that said this, it's somebody else far wiser than me, who's a brilliant maker called Leslie Hutchison, and she would always say to me when we make a work, pure and simple. And I kind of feel like that about everything, especially a pitch. So I would really urge everybody, as Tim and Kiki and Bartek have said, don't overcomplicate it. The most important thing, as Tim said, is the quality. So you don't want to let yourself down by trying to make a feature film on your mobile phone, which we've all tried to do. I have personally tried to do it, where you're sort of bending over backwards, trying to use editing software that you don't really know how to use and trying to make it amazing, when actually the most important thing is you get a brilliant recording of a song and you have a succinct bit of text that says, this is going to be amazing because, and ideally a story. I would also say, as well as having gone to Butlins my entire childhood, so I do like a bit of karaoke, Tim, I've got to admit. We did that, when you used to go in and they used to put like the screen behind you, and like me and my sister, there's very embarrassing films floating about. But actually for me, having the words on the bottom is sometimes useful for some of my colleagues, just because it works as captioning. So that's also just something to consider as well, is that as somebody who often, I've got neurological challenges myself, considering that not everybody that receives your pitch is going to have the same neurological gubbins as you, if that makes sense, is sometimes quite helpful. But also no one is going to think badly of you if you can't make the captioning work. So recently I made a film with a filmmaker and working for another company with Pitlochry, and it took us quite a long time to make the captions work, but we needed to. So we're also really aware that some people may not know how to make that happen as well. So what's really great then is really simply just include the song lyrics, and that's just really helpful too. So do your best, sort of thing, and also maybe useful just to put an email if people need it in a different format to let you know, and then it shows that you have considered it, even if maybe it's not been possible for you to do it. And also that's also about relating to a previous question, James and Ellen, about who you're contacting, because I would also say, if you are really interested in making a piece of work with a really diverse company, which we are in Pitlochry, then you might consider like how it's going to be accessible to everybody as well. And I'd really recommend that if that is of interest to you, and it's a new thing in your life, then to look up the work of Grey Eye, Birds of Paradise. I would say those are good starting points, and obviously the national companies do lots of brilliant work around that as well. Yeah, so that's what I would say. Leslie Hutchison, brilliant artist, would say pure and simple.
That was fantastic. And I think what I'm really enjoying about this panel is they're already answering all of my questions as they form. Before we move on from that point, did any of the rest of the panel have any more tips or suggestions on how to best make the content accessible and relevant to people who you're pitching to? I mean, I think Elizabeth's covered it brilliantly though. No? I'm seeing shaking heads. So our next question to kind of continue this on was then around how, if we step back a moment and say that you're the creatives and you're trying to approach, like, how am I going to do this pitch? What would be your top tips in terms of helping people find out what the essence and the flavor of their musical is that they need to convey? You know, a lot of people would say, oh, you know, you'll know that, but as someone who may receive pitches or someone who has pitched, how do you efficiently express that key sparkle of what your musical is, and how will you hook in the audience, both as someone who's being pitched, but also, as Elizabeth mentioned, the audiences of the venues or the producers that you're pitching to?
I would say that you should think about why you're writing it, because generally your audience will connect with the same thing that made you connect with it in the first place. And it's also very helpful if you feel like something's not quite working in the current draft. Go back to why this actually interests you, why you're spending this much time writing it, and focus on that for any pitch, synopsis, and so on.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, it's we all know that musicals take a very, very long time both to write and to produce. You know, before they get onto the stage, you have to have a passion for the project you're working on. Otherwise, it's probably best to find another subject. So, you know, so distill the essence of that passion and convey it. You know. You know, if it's a theatrical piece, if it's a piece which belongs, by which I mean if it's a piece that belongs in a theatre or theatre space, then hopefully your passion will connect to an audience as well. You know, so that's really important. Especially, I think, especially if it's an original idea. Well, perhaps, yeah, I guess both ways. If it's an original idea, it can be very exciting to you, but it's a lot more work to get your piece to wrestle it down into a form which we recognize as a musical. If it's an adaptation, you have a lot more to go on in terms of the guidance that structure is going to give you in the writing. But a producer may well say, well, you know, I don't think we really need an adaptation of Bleak House, or maybe we do, but what, you know, to tell us tell us why we should be doing another Dickens, you know.
I would also, building on what everyone else has said, embrace the theatricality of it. Again, we're choosing this medium for a reason. So think about in your pitch, how are you going to convey the fact that it's meant to be in a theater space? It could be as simple as you've composed it to where the band is all, you know, guitar strings. So give us a flavor of that. Don't come and, you know, play the piece on a piano because the piano is provided. You know, we get most of the time, especially with live pitches, we see a performer stand at a piano and sing a piece, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the moment you break away from that form, it gets really interesting. So just think about how you can push that. I know digitally it's a bit more challenging, but think about what's going to make this unique and exciting and feel a bit different than you know, the 20 previous pitches that you might have heard that day, or the 20 previous pitches you've heard, period. So brace the theatricality of the medium.
Mm.
Anything further on that? Or moving on, just building on a point there. I mean, we've talked already just briefly about the fact, and this has come up, I know when we've been looking at being pitches, there's been some debate about, sometimes people think it's just the show that's being pitched, and then producers have often said to us, actually, it's as much the artist, it's their creative vision and the sense of what it might be like to work with those creatives on developing their vision further. So it is a little bit like speed dating sometimes. There's this dynamic of exploring the compatibility creatively. And in a way, you're putting a pitch out, you're sort of saying, here's a snapshot of what it might be like for you to get on board and be part of this journey with me. So you're giving them the little sort of seductive little bits of what that journey might be like to, if they were involved. Sort of expanding on that aspect of a pitch, I wonder if any of you on the panel can give us further tips, you would say, in terms of how people can put more of their personality or how they might share their creative vision within a pitch. How best, because I think this is something I've certainly seen people can sometimes struggle or feel uncomfortable. They want the work to speak for itself. But if it's the creative putting it forward, often it is about the way they allow the work to speak. Are there any observations from the pitches you've been involved in or received that you would say in terms of what works well for people expressing their creative brand, if you like, or their personality as creatives? What it is that will create that spark that will make you want to collaborate with them or be part of that journey? Any thoughts? Elizabeth looks very lost in thought.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about how hard that is. That's what I was thinking. Because I think it's just really hard. And I was thinking about a time where I'd experienced somebody achieve it. And actually, I think the key thing is to get into a dialogue. Mm. And that's when your personality can reveal itself, as you're saying, James. But I was trying to think of a time where it had been successful. And I think some of it was linked to the people providing links to their previous work, which has been really helpful. So you get a real feel for them and their vibe and what they've done before. And ideally, obviously, global pandemic aside, you would actually go and see their work, and then you can really understand it, can't you? You immediately go, oh, okay, I get it, yeah. But yeah, I would definitely say, yeah, that's hard. That's not very helpful, really, but it is hard.
No, it is. I think it's reassuring as well, isn't it? That I think we all struggle with this in terms of it's the outside eye as well, isn't it? But sorry, Tim, you were going to say.
Well, I was just picking up on what you said about collaboration, and that's echoed what Kiki said earlier in the conversation as well. I think that you have to. You don't have to, but I think it's really important that you, especially if you're bringing an idea to a theatre at an early stage, or a producer, it might be a burning vision that you have of it, and you might have a very clear vision of how you want it to go, which is fantastic. But a producer is a collaborator, just as your lyricist or your librettist is a collaborator. And I think, to have a personality whereby it's clear that you are open to suggestions. It might not be about the material, but certainly about the way in which it lives within that producer's vision as well, because they're not simply just an empty vessel into which you put your work. They will very often want to have a creative views, and their creative views may well be definitely will be extremely helpful in shaping a piece. So I think so it's a slightly tangential to personality, but I think that it's worth bearing in mind that producers are not simply receivers to say, yes, this is the perfect thing. I will translate it from this pitch to the stage. Don't worry about it. I mean, I'm speaking imaginatively because, once again, I'm not a producer, but that's the way that I would feel. And certainly the producers that I've worked with have been very interested in the creative process. Have wanted to I think they feel it's their role is to remind the creators about what's not possible, obviously, but also what is possible and what they might not have thought of. So I think it's worth just bearing in mind from a human interactive perspective when you make your pitch in person. Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with everything Tim and Elizabeth have said. I would also, I hate public speaking. I'm so pleased we're staring at our own faces on Zoom right now. This is lovely. And I always get nervous public speaking, so I can imagine standing up there and, either pitching on camera or to a room of people can be really, nerve-wracking. But take the time to feel comfortable with what you want to get across, especially if it's in person. So it feels natural. I think the moment we feel your nerves or feel uncomfortable for you, we get a bit distanced. And just know that, the people that you're pitching to we're human, and it's the same reason you love theater, we love theater. And yes, of course, we're scary because we're staring at you with blank faces, so we give away nothing, or you don't know how it's going to be received if it's a recording or digitally done. But at the end of the day, I hope we're all people. We're really cool. We love doing this. I wouldn't give up days on end listening to new musicals if we didn't love doing it. So just, we're not here to be adversarial. We're here to support you and find something that where everyone's excited to work on. So just go in and don't think of us as they're sitting and judging or watching the video and judging. It's very, hopefully, supportive environment. So come in with that positive outlook, and hopefully it will help with the nerves. I don't know if it would help with mine, but.
So building up on that, I think it's worth remembering that we don't all communicate in the same ways, and because of that, the way one person pitches, and I mean even in the most basic sense of them talking about their show to the camera, it doesn't have to be the same as how another person does that. So for example, some people are very uncomfortable speaking to the camera. Some people are comfortable if they have an exact script written out and they sound very natural delivering that. Other people work best with just having bullet points, because the moment you give them a word-for-word script, they sound extremely robotic. So two examples are actually my own pitch, or rather Kickstarter video from a while back that I was doing with a friend, and she knew what she wanted to say, she knew what she had to say, but she just couldn't get the words together. So I literally wrote her a script in her voice using exactly the way that she speaks, and it worked perfectly. She sounded completely natural. But then a few years back, I was doing a video for someone, and it turned out that they absolutely can't find any way to be comfortable in front of the camera if they're speaking. Okay, so the solution was, let's have them speak as little as possible. Let's have them say literally one sentence, and everything else was completely visual. They were in that video, it was all about them, but it was done completely visually, and it worked great. So you kind of have to find your own approach to pitching that feels natural to you. And in a way, you kind of have to find your language of pitching. But also, because we're talking largely about digital pitching, remember that you can edit things. So if you can only deliver 3 sentences at a time smoothly, that's fine. Figure out some graphics. Maybe you have some sketches that you can use. Maybe you have some reference pictures. Put that on top of that to hide cuts. And even if you don't have that, you can always fade between things. You don't necessarily have to sit down and deliver the perfect pitch in a single take and send that out. You can actually work with that even after the recording. So play around with it, find something that works for you. That does not necessarily have to be the same thing as what worked for your friend.
Would you recommend, Bartek, actually having, a constant rate of change or refreshing of images, or is it different for every pitch? I'm just very mindful that we see so much content, and we tend to get bored. Unfortunately, we just have a short plan, and I don't know whether there's it kind of goes against the sort of simplicity of what I'm saying, but I'm just thinking as I think about putting a video together, I'm thinking, well, I'd want to start with maybe addressed in a camera, but then I'd want to cut something else. I want to kind of make it artful. I mean, would you sort of recommend that you should be mindful of the rate of attention, should we say?
You should be mindful, but not in that it should be constant. So whenever I edit, there's always a musical element to it, even if there is no music at all in video. And by that I mean there's a certain rhythm to editing that comes from the interplay of all the elements. So there's a rhythm to how someone moves, for example. So if, let's say, you're editing action, there is a rhythm to the movement of the people moving, and that dictates how long certain shots are, where the cuts are, or even if you decide to slow something down. There's a rhythm to how we speak, but there's also a rhythm to the story that we're telling, and a pitch is a story, ultimately. So I wouldn't assume anything until I know what the show is about and what kind of the rhythm of the show is and the rhythm of the pitch. So right now, for example, the digital pitches that we'll be doing with James and Emily, I have no idea how any of them will be edited, and I'm basically assuming that each of them might be very, very different. Because there will be different elements. The songs will be different, but also sometimes we'll show 2 full songs, sometimes we'll show 1 song and 1 partial song, sometimes people will bring in additional materials that could be images or videos. So the thing about editing is that it's a very organic process most of the time, unless you're spending a long time planning things, and even then, unexpected things happen. So to give you an example, not from a pitch or from musical theater, if you've seen Avengers Endgame, I hope that I won't spoil it for anyone at this point. Like we're no longer in the you can't spoil things territory for that movie. If you remember the line "I am Iron Man" at the very end, just before Robert Downey Jr. does the snap, that wasn't in the script. That was not shot on the day. That was, I believe, the very last thing they shot after they've already edited that scene, and the editor was like, you know what would work well here? That. And they got Robert Downey Jr., went back just to shoot that moment. So it's a process. You shouldn't assume anything when it comes to the rhythm or even which elements you use, because sometimes you might think that this image is the most important image for the entire pitch, and then actually it's not working, and I'm kind of talking about it enough, and then it's in the song, so I'm already communicating that idea. So let's just get rid of it.
It's a very enjoyable process, I find, editing. It's very satisfying, and now you can
Depends
get.
on the deadline.
Yeah, well, maybe deadlines are always good too. I mean, yeah, I mean now you can get iMovie on your phone. You can do sort of pretty decent, basic editing.
If you've got a laptop or a desktop, so sure, you can do a lot of things on your phone, but a program that I have mentioned probably 50 times in the last month is Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve. And the reason for that is they have a completely free version available that has about 90% of the functionality of the full program. And to give you an idea of what the full program is, if, let's say, you shot a really expensive commercial, you go into a post-production house to get it color graded, you probably have at least a 50% chance that that really expensive post-production studio with 5 figures, if not more, worth of equipment in one room is using that program. So that's how powerful it is, and you literally get 90% of the functionality for free. You can literally download it now and edit in it.
Just have a look. Have to have a look.
They should start paying me. I keep pushing their software and their cameras on everyone, but it's like if you want to do a lot on a small budget or a no budget, that's a very reasonable place to start. Because then, if you
just
gigs on your premium hard drive, it's quite a bit.
And if you want to upgrade at some point, you can, and you're not switching to a new program. It's like, okay, I'm making videos all the time. I'm going to spend, I think it's like £250 or something like that for the full version. I'm going to invest to get that extra few things that I'm missing out on, and I don't have to relearn it.
Sorry, Bartek, someone was asking you to repeat the name of the program from watching online.
Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve.
Fantastic. You heard it here. Top technical tip. One other thing, just to clarify, Elizabeth's going to make a point, just to clarify that the digital pictures we're talking about there are being made partly to distribute as part of the digital aspect of Beam on Streamblock Theatre, but also to be shared more widely. And they'll be both sort of pictures to camera, but also very much filming individual songs to be shared in various online platforms. We felt actually, as we were discussing, often it is just having the content of just the songs with no sophisticated graphics at all. It's just a song sung behind a microphone, really simply to camera. We feel that actually the less visual craziness, the better. And often it's about, as long as it's clear and the sound quality is good, those are the priorities. And just going to hand over to Elizabeth to make her point, but also to just say, I've been wanting to say, don't forget to say the size of your cast and band. This is something that people often forget, but can often be a really crucial thing to give people a sense of the scale of the show that you're aiming towards, and whether it might be within the budgets of your potential collaborators. Just what you're aiming for in terms of scale is quite relevant. But over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was just going to answer Caitlin Burt's question. Hi, Caitlin. Would I recommend sending links of previous works if they're unrelated in tone? Yes. Because it does link to your next point, which is it helpful to show you have a level of competency? Yes. And it's also linked to the fact that even if you're making a different piece of work in tone, quite often there's still a real sense of you as an artist that runs through all of your body of work, that's really enjoyable to experience. So yeah, so any links is helpful. The other thing is, Caitlin, as soon as your question came in, I just put your name into Google and then I put it into Twitter, which sounds really low rent on my part, but there's also no denying that if you've piqued someone's interest with that one song, which is often the case with me, I then go down a rabbit hole and I start and I find, if your interest is enough, the person on the other end will search out things as well. And you've got a beautiful website, I can see. where you look very smiley and very happy and very jolly, and you've got different things on there that I could look at. You're looking at the Moon, winner of the song for our time. So so I would go down that rabbit hole of your website and start clicking. So there's also about knowing that as soon as somebody's gone, wow, this is a quality piece of work and this artist is really exciting, if they're an obsessive, which most people are who are producers and artistic directors, they'll find the information that they're looking for too. So it's also about being reassured, I guess, that if you have got that information out there, it is there, but also linked to that, knowing that it is a rabbit hole and people are looking at your social media. So if there is stuff that you don't want on there about, actually consider that is how people are going to get to know your personality too, which is just useful to know.
That's fantastic.
That's brilliant. Just to add, sorry, Ellen, to jump in on that, I was just going to say that brings us back to something earlier where we were saying how hard it is to get across personality. I think what Elizabeth just described is a perfect example of a digital seduction that, when we date, we go and do the Google search of what is this person's background, but that's the digital equivalent, is people going, who is this person, looking online, and we're seduced by the other content that we see on social media and in other areas. And that's where you get that personality sometimes, I guess, in the digital world, isn't it? Is that your digital footprint. So it's a really great example of that. Thanks, Elizabeth. Sorry, Alan, back to you.
No, that's all right. I think that leads us into really well that this is the part one of our panel event series. We will be doing a second part on the promotion, social media marketing and so on. That's in about a month. I have forgotten the date, James. I haven't written it down. I think it's the 19th of July.
It's very close. It's Thursday, the 22nd of July. Thursday, the 22nd of July, 7 till 8:30.
And we'll be looking at the social media, online marketing, promotion, and how you get that pitch out there and seen by the right people and kind of building your audiences. But I think I'd like to wrap up with just a bit of a question in terms of, someone mentioned to me that, pitching is all about great luck and great timing and being in the right place at the right time in front of the right people. How can we as artists, creatives, but also producers and people receiving pitches build our confidence and our practice in pitching our work? Do you have any final tips or hidden wisdom for those who might be watching?
Don't be discouraged if the answer is no. That it's like casting. You could have been turned away for the most minute of reasons, which has absolutely nothing to do with the quality and content that you've put forward. But know that if, as Elizabeth said, if you've piqued someone's interest, it won't be the last time you interact with them. I've received pitches from the same people for different things over and over and over, and it hasn't been until the third or fourth pitch or project that we've said, okay, now that's the right connection. But that person has always been on my radar, or we've invited them to come back. So now half the battle is making the connection and putting yourself out there. And, if it's not the right project, then there's nothing wrong with putting that on a shelf, moving on to the next thing that you feel passionate about, and putting that out into the world.
Practice pitching, but not in front of the mirror, or not necessarily just by pitching to producers, but talk about your show to your friends, to people you work with, because that is practice. Every time someone asks you what your show is about, that's an opportunity to refine your pitch a little bit, because in a way, you won't necessarily start getting bored of your own pitch, but you'll automatically start shortening it and leaving out the bits that aren't necessarily that fascinating to you. And through that, your pitch will get distilled, it will get more interesting. So yeah, talk about your show to people.
Can I just follow on from that brilliant comment from Bartek, which is Arthur Miller because you know he's amazing. He said about all of his plays, he could tell the story to someone on a train. So, you know, when you're on a train, and if you're anything like me, you sit opposite somebody and you end up hearing their life story, which is a brilliant Tennessee Williams poem. If you don't know it already, Google it, it's really good. And really, actually, talking to somebody that you don't know very well and telling them about it and getting their opinion is a winner. And seeing when they sort of zone out or look less interested, or maybe it isn't as compelling, is as helpful as having that positive endorsement from the people that love us, that feel like they have to say it's brilliant even when it's a bit shoddy still, you know. So it's useful to think of the person on a train. And the other thing I was just going to say, which sounds I'm worried how it's going to come across, but I feel like I should say it, which is being an inspiring good person who has great values is a thing. So quite often you select collaborators or you commission work because you also feel like that artist is going to nourish the organization, the audience, the landscape, the whatever, you know. So it is really important to be your best self, you know, and that follows through from the pitch all the way through the project, because then you'll get another project. And I think quite often that doesn't get said enough. And if we weren't streaming live on YouTube, I'd probably use some sort of expletive at this point. But it is important to be a person that people actually want to work with and invest that much money, because you know musicals are expensive. You know, I was looking at a musical budget that we have for a musical that we've got in development, and the production, you know, is 300 grand, and that's not a lot of money to do a musical. You know, and if you're going to invest 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 pounds in a project, and that is not even a commercial sum of money, that's a regional theatre, that person and who they are and how they're going to treat people is also going to be really important. And it does matter. And I know quite often people think, oh well, as long as you're brilliant, then that's all that matters. And of course that matters, but brilliant and lovely is the gold dust, and that's what we all cling to and want to work with and for. And as the artist director, I want to serve that and invest in that for the audience. And that kind of links to the Twitter Googling comment, which is, Caitlin, people have said lovely things after I made those comments about you. Like Ellen said, you're smiling and jolly and you're one of the nicest humans, and Tim said the same. So that's what's going to happen. You know, if you've made a pitch and an organisation's about to invest, I am going to ring the people that you've worked with before and go, oh, how was it? Did it work out all right? You know, what was it like when it all didn't go to plan? You know, and so these things do matter, and so I guess that's also part of it, about going, commit to being the artist that you want to be, that you know is going to be good for the world. And yeah, sorry, that was a ramble really, but I just feel like it's not said enough, that's all. So I'm going to stop talking now.
Nothing to add. There were fantastic thoughts from everybody. It's been so lovely to be here, and thank you, James. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Emily. Thank you all. I'm not really my place to wrap up, but it's been so nice to hear from everyone.
I definitely think this panel has pretty much done James and I's job for us in terms of sharing their wisdom and expertise. And Tim, you can wrap up and, you know, come work for us. Thank you everyone so much for your time and sharing your wisdom with us, and to everyone who's watching live or watching on the replay, for your questions and for watching. Any final thoughts, James?
No, just do join us, as we said, for part 2 on Thursday, the 22nd of July, or both of these conversations will be shared on YouTube eventually, hopefully. But yeah, just to say a huge thanks to our 4 panelists who, like every great pitch person, have shared a little bit of themselves. And that's the thing, we're all looking for that shared humanity to connect in with someone and go, oh, I'd like to be in the rehearsal room. We can certainly say we'd look forward to be in the room in person with our 4 panelists today. So thank you very much for sharing some of this evening with us, and thank you all of you online for sharing some of your time with us. We look forward to further conversations with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And we hope to see you perhaps at Beam in September for some more pictures and see how it's done. Thank you, everyone.